Hey everyone, welcome to Listen Love Connect. I'm Savannah Palafox, your host, and today's guest is Sumar Fabara. We will be talking about generational trauma with Encanto and Turning Red, the new Disney and Pixar film. Let's head over to Somi and get started. Listen Love Connect is brought to you by Exceptional Heroes. All right, so today we are talking about generational trauma. And the reason why Somi and I picked this topic was because we were having a conversation about Encanto, the new Disney movie, and then currently another new Disney movie came out called Turning Red, or I think it's Pixar, whatever, same company.
Yes.
And that was also about generational trauma. And both hit home for me. What about you, Somi? How did you feel about the movies?
Oh my gosh, definitely hit home. Encanto was introduced to me. I heard about it, but it was introduced to me by my son, Maro. Turning Red, I heard about it and introduced it to him. So yes, it both personally and professionally, it was definitely like, okay, Disney, I see what you guys are doing here.
Yeah.
What, two movies in few months. I don't know if it was Encanto came out last September or no, November or thereabout.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then this one came out in, was it early March,
This
right?
month? Yeah, I think this month.
Yeah. So somebody at Disney is either a therapist or very in tune or healing and realizing, they're doing some of the work to say, hey, listen,
Mm-hmm.
we need to connect with the world and what is going on in the world and let the world see it on screen. So it's a beautiful thing. I'm excited for us to explore Encanto and Turning Red, among other I should say this, and I wanted to just kind of put this out here, like this theme of intergenerational drama. This theme of intergenerational trauma is not, especially because Encanto is a Latino storyline, and then Turning Red is an Asian storyline. I don't want people to think that intergenerational trauma is specific to these. So intergenerational trauma is no respecter of persons, of race, of culture, of ethnicity. So, one of the other movies that I can think of right now that shows intergenerational trauma is even Frozen. Mm-hmm. So, and that was, I think that was like Celtic or so. I don't even know. I know it was, more of a white storyline, but yeah. I think I don't know if they were from some kind of European country, or I don't remember. That's but anyhow.
Yeah. But that one's my favorite movie. But Encanto has turned to be close to my favorite due to relating in an aspect of curly hair and someone who wears glasses. I don't wear glasses on screen because but yes, I do wear glasses, so it's fun to see a character who's wearing glasses, had curly hair, and pretty much the whole cast of Encanto had curly hair, so which was a lot of fun, because I always dealt with having curly hair, even though no one really said, "Ooh, gross, you have curly hair" or anything like that. I just always had an issue with it and always straightened it, but I've embraced it in the last few years. So having a movie come out that was close to home, close to what I look like, was very refreshing. And then with Turning Red, it was like, ooh, this hits home too, even though I don't, just like you said, Somi, it's not just one culture. I also fit into Turning Red, even though it was from an Asian point of view. And being Hispanic, I did fit into it, being that it was spiritual and I used to be religious. So all that kind of fit in with me. And also from a Hispanic point, respecting your elders, which both movies had.
Yeah, so it's interesting when we talk about intergenerational trauma. This one is a biggie.
Yeah.
Because I think even intertwined in intergenerational trauma is this aspect of spiritual and religious trauma as well.
Mm-hmm.
And from that perspective, especially from a religious perspective, especially if you were raised Christian, it's you obey your elders, and they actually like browbeat you this whole concept of obedience.
Yeah.
Which what people are starting to understand. A lot of people that are doing the work and are awakening to like, yo, some of this stuff is just repetition of patterns of trauma, is that what your grandfather or your father did, and that is now being imposed on you, may not be actually good.
Mm-hmm.
Not only for you, but it wasn't good for them either.
Yeah.
But because of this sense of you just obey,
Mm-hmm.
your parents say do X, Y, and Z, or this person say, well, or you're in school, or you're in church, or wherever. This whole concept of intergenerational trauma, I'd say it because trauma is so relational. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just specific to family.
Right.
It's communal as well, as one of the things that we saw in Encanto and in Turning Red. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the trauma is not like, oh, it stays with the family.
Right.
It may definitely be very apparent in the family, but and that's what a problem a lot of people have with breaking out and healing, is because they're looking at everybody and saying, oh, well, they have these same dysfunctions, so it's normal and it's okay. So even this concept of, spanking or beating or whatever we call it, I mean, it's so controversial. And I'm just like, it's amazing to me how hitting your child, whether you call it spanking, hitting, beating, any act of taking your hand or an object to hit somebody is considered good for them.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting people to ask these very critical questions, like, where did that come from? But more importantly, this whole aspect of obedience is like, how does it feel? Like if because people are like, well, my parents beat me, or I went through all of that, but I turned out okay. But I'm like, did you really turn out okay? Let's be honest.
I can kind of answer it on where it came from. From a Christian standpoint, in the Bible, it says, spare the rod. Yep.
Spoil the child. Yep. Oh no, I'm very aware. I mean, that's one of the things like lately, especially with this Hillsong saga, I've been having to explore my seminary journey. Mm-hmm. And how at one point in time, I was going to become a pastoral counselor and I was going to be this minister. And I was just like, but I came to my senses. And not necessarily that anybody that becomes a minister or whatever is out of their mind, but for me, I knew that the things that I was told to be obedient to and to just follow blindly, it didn't feel good for me, mind, body, spirit. Yeah. And that's one of the things that causes the trauma for a lot of people, is because at an early age, we teach people and we condition them and socialize them to ignore their feelings and their intuition. Mm-hmm. So it's like something is happening and your whole body, you're triggered, like as an alarm, like as a good alarm, like, yo, this doesn't feel good. This is not right. But because of our social conditioning for years and the transfer of trauma, we tend to just ignore those triggers to help us stay safe. So then when we are now triggered outside, when there isn't an alarm, it's like everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at the way they're behaving. And I'm like, well, wait a second, we created this. Mm-hmm. This is a passing down. So even with Encanto and with Turning Red, we see this theme of young children. And that's another thing. It's like the children are like hell no. We are not going to repeat. We're going to be the cycle breakers.
Yeah.
They're not going to continue, because you could see how it was destroying them.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that was one of the really beautiful things about it. If people missed that, it was, you saw how May or Mirabelle, when they were really trying not to feel and to be obedient and to follow the family pattern,
Mm-hmm.
it was really just, it destroyed them from the inside out, especially with May in Turning Red. Oh my gosh, watching her being isolated.
Yeah.
And I mean, literally isolated.
Literally.
And said, listen, you stay in here until you know, we want to take this feeling out of you. This thing that is natural, this thing that is who you are, we want, and this thing that brings you a sense of joy. And granted, she had to understand as a child how to navigate it,
Right.
but that should have been the narrative. Is like, oh, your grandma has the panda. I have the panda. Your aunts have the panda. But instead it was like, and just that in Turning Red, just watching them separate, that element of, I'm literally, you saw them being separated from a part of who they are.
Yeah.
Oh, another aspect to all of this. So what, for you, like this element of obedience, you were talking about from a spiritual standpoint or religious standpoint, what did it do for you?
So a few things like came up. For me, it was bringing me back to like in the church, you had to be a certain way. You had to do this, this, and this, from both behavioral and then also how you looked. Due to me loving to change up my hair, coloring it different styles and stuff, I got made fun, especially from the pastor and the males of the church when I cut my hair. They were like, it's not feminine, stuff like that. So with Turning Red, when they wanted to basically not want to not wanting her to have the red panda was like for my hair. They didn't want me to cut it, stuff like that. My mom didn't care, hair grows back. But within the church, they didn't like it. Me and my sister, have always been not rebels, but like we always question things. And we did it our best respectfully, but given that most kids would just say yes ma'am, no ma'am, and me and my sister would be, well, that doesn't sound right, we'd get pulled into the office a lot and my mom would have to come in. So from the aspect of spirituality and stuff, very strict. You feel like a lot of times that you can't do certain things when that's not the case, I feel like. And then from another aspect is my grandpa. So I feel like he really, when I watched Encanto with him, he was like, but that's the grandma. And so I feel like some of that was him saying, you still need to respect them type thing, because he doesn't, like, he's 70 something years old and I'm trying to explain to him, but he's like, but it was the grandma, you're supposed to respect your elders type thing. So it made me sad for him, because he just, I don't know how to explain it for him, you know. And then, but from the spiritual aspect, I'm glad I'm out. I broke that barrier.
Well, yeah, and you've been bringing up your grandpa, and it's consistent in probably many households. This narrative of you need to respect your elders. So even if your elders are wrong, you still respect them. I mean, the Bible tells you, honor your mother and father so that your days may be long. And that's one of the things that I struggle with. I'm like, okay, what does that mean exactly? I mean, not honestly that I am focused on that, but I know that at one point in time, I was like, how do I honor my mother and father or whoever else I'm supposed to honor when I feel, not even I feel, like, I think one of the things that kind of would, it doesn't confuse me anymore, but it used to confuse me. It's like, okay, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's like, honor your parents, respect your elders. But then you're like, well, wait a second, that thing they're doing, they said I shouldn't do it. Right. Like, for instance, lying. Oh my gosh. I mean, as a child, that was the first, you don't lie. Lying is bad. It's one of the 7 deadly sins and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, but you're doing it. Right. And it's like, do as I say, not as I do. And I'm like, but here's the thing about that. Children mimic modeling. They don't, 90% of the time, they're mimicking what they see, not what you have said. So that's why people are like, well, wait a second. I told my child this, and I raised them this way. And I said, but what did you model? What did they see you do every day? So if you were stressed, did they see you emotionally eat? You know, when you were whatever, afraid, did they see you kind of shut down? You know, when you were angry, was your response to yell and throw things? So even though you're telling them, don't do this, and telling them to be obedient to you, it's what I keep saying, turning that mirror around. Yeah. And this is where it's hard for a lot of parents, and we're in this concept of intergenerational trauma, taking responsibility and accountability that you play a part. Like, they're your children. You can't even say, even if they're 50 years old now, they are your children. And unless you're saying somebody else raised them, but if you were they were raised in your home, you have to take some accountability for the modeling. Now, am I saying that as an adult, they need to blame their parents? No, that's not healthy either. But that's where the cycle, we start breaking this intergenerational cycle, is realizing, okay, my parents were traumatized and their parents were traumatized and their parents before that were traumatized. And so I was raised by traumatized individuals. And so that probably ignited a lot of my trauma. But now I'm in the position, especially me as a mother, it's always been my thing. Like, I am not going to just repeat cycles. Right. Like with my son, I'm like, I want to hear your voice. I tell him all the time, don't just go with what I say. I want you to think. However, I need to expose you to have a comprehensive, holistic idea, then that's what I'm gonna do. But I want you to think for yourself. Don't follow me. I have my beliefs and core values and everything, but they may not be yours because you're a completely different human being. So I'm not trying to create another Somi Fubara. It's virtually impossible. And that's part of the trauma, is a lot of times parents want to live vicariously through our children or to mold them into what we want, instead of accepting and realizing this individual is an individual.
And that's like with Christianity, they're like, if you were raised Christianity, then your kids have to be raised with Christianity, and so on and so forth. And I remember I don't think I ever realized it until I got out after my attack, but I think I've always not liked it due to the fact that I always thought certain people's beliefs were beautiful, like the Native Americans and their beliefs with some of their things. And I always thought it was beautiful. Not that I wanted to do it, but like I've always been curious and stuff like that. And in the Bible, it's like you cannot stray off to look into other religions and stuff like that. So, and then also in the aspect of Turning Red, I related to when she would be like this different type of girl. She loved different bands and stuff. But when she got home, she's like, oh yeah, they're gross.
Yeah, no, that element of perfection and
Yeah.
wanting to be that perfect child for your mom or your grandma or whomever. Oh yeah, I call it shape-shifting.
Yeah, it is.
I call it, in some African-American communities, we call it code switching. It's
Okay.
the element where the other day, it's interesting, we're talking about this. The other day, I was saying to myself, how is it possible that this passing down of trauma and this intergenerational trauma has created personality disorders?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you think about it, if at home, the whole Turning Red started off with, I'm a straight A student, I'm in band, I'm this, and it goes through that whole Asian narrative. And oh my gosh, there's so many Asian kids that I know that that's their life. It's like perfection, and they're in piano, and they do chess, and they do this. And we have this stereotype of Asian kids are just like the most brilliant and blah, or sometimes even Indian children. Indian, not Native American, or indigenous. I want to clarify that because I don't call it that. But looking at May, and then if we see it in Encanto with, is it Isabella?
Yes.
I can't remember the character. The one that is like the perfect daughter.
Yeah.
She's just, and then Mirabel helps her to realize, and there's this big production of her like, yo, this is so much pressure and it's so tiring, and actually it's not even who I am. And so you see May, and May is just an example of millions of children and millions of people that when they're in this situation, they're this person. And when they're this, they're this. And so even from a psychological standpoint, I'm like, the other day I was at a meeting with some new acquaintances and a friend. And the question came up, something about, they asked me like how, I want to say how, I think the question was like, how would you describe yourself or something like that? I can't remember. But I remember saying that, giving the answer, because the question was into being a member of this social club, the Soho House. It's like the who's who or whatever. So they have this question where they ask you like some, very, I don't even know. I feel it's a very exclusionary type question. But I said, well, I would tell them that my public and private self are the same. She kind of looked at me like that. She's like, you are the same person properly as you're. And I was like, yeah, I really am. Like I always tell people I don't even apologize anymore. I just tell them what you see is what you get. Like, I'm not going to step into this environment and be this, and step into this environment and be this. And I think once I came to that knowing, I should admit, I wasn't always like this. And it requires what we saw, whether with May or Mirabel or Isabella, is that once you decide like, yo, this is who I am. I mean, we have that scene where May is like, listen, I love boy bands. And I love this, and I love that. And this is who I am. And she's like taunting her mom by shaking her butt at the panda. I mean, Mara, my son, absolutely loved that because he can relate. He feels a lot of times. So he will say to me sometimes, Mom, I just don't feel like I belong, which in one aspect is so heartbreaking, but it's, if we as parents listen to them, it's like, this kid is saying, I don't think like that. And then I don't like some of the things that other people like, and it's okay. That's why we're different. We're not all supposed to be the same. So for me, that element of perfectionism is almost always consistent in intergenerational trauma. Whether it's one person or several people, or what you'll find is just little element of people pleasing that comes out. And then you have what everybody calls the black sheep of the family, who's like, nope.
Yeah.
I am not gonna, this aspect of perfection that you guys are, I don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. It's too much pressure. It's raising my anxiety. It's giving me depression. I feel like I'm different personalities. I don't know if I'm coming or going. I can't sleep. I mean, it's so much. I mean, when I think about it and some of the people I've worked with, I'm like, there's a constant narrative of perfectionism and performance. You know, even May, it's like, you got to put on a performance. You got to be this. You got to, and, you know, whether for the grandparents or the parents. So again, it's just, you know, these are the things that we're seeing from a generational trauma perspective.
And that kind of brings up Louisa's song, where she feels like she's holding up the world. Which I related to.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
So when I first watched the movie, I was watching it and all of a sudden song came on and I was about to cry, and I felt I related to it so well, and I couldn't understand why, because like not that I've never had stress like from school and stuff like that, but I've never felt like that before until Somi and I were talking yesterday, and I was like, it dawned on me. That's how I felt when I was trying to hide what happened to me, my rape. Like, I was trying to be a certain way in front of my friends, pretending that I was going to church for my parents, and then I'd be in my room and I would just cry because I was trying. And then I would get a friend that would knock on the door and I would have to clean myself up real quick, open the door, or if my mom called and I was in the middle of crying, I'd clean myself up. So that song was very relatable. I know it was relatable to a lot of other people. But yeah, that song really hit hard.
Yeah, and I thought, you know, I definitely hear you and understand what you're saying. And in addition, I just thought it was just the way they even represented Louisa to look very like this element of, if you're strong, then you are masculine looking.
Yeah.
You know, and just everything about that. And a lot of people could relate to that too, because it's like this notion that strength is equated to masculinity, and as being feminine equates some element of weakness. Yeah. You're the damsel in distress, and you have to be rescued and you have to be defended. I mean, we're going through a global awakening right now with everything that just happened over the weekend at the Oscars. And you and I talked about this. I just talked about this again with a family member last night. And I was just like, I'm really confused as to this, why even women, but again, that's part of the intergenerational trauma and the patterns that a man needs to defend us. So even if you have bought into that narrative, oh my gosh, he was defending his wife. And I'm just like, well, wait a second. Don't you see an element of sexism in that?
Yeah.
Like, are you trying to say she could not do that on her own? Or maybe she's been conditioned to realize that I stay quiet.
Yeah.
I don't speak up and I don't have a voice, which leads us to just this whole element of intergenerational trauma and what happens at the end.
Yeah.
And at the end, what you see is Mirabel and May finding their voices.
Yeah.
And with them finding their voices and with them using their voices and being the cycle breakers, what happens? We see this happy ending. We see family come together. We see the community come together too.
A
which is
happily
all
ever after.
right. But I should say this. It's a movie.
Yes.
Not to say it doesn't happen, but one of the things that I feel that we are also socialized, and it can be part of our trauma bonding,
Mhm.
is that we buy into the sensation of this happy ending. And sometimes it doesn't pan out that way.
Yeah.
There are times where all your efforts to say no more intergenerational trauma, we're breaking the cycles, are met with so much resistance and so much venom and so much ostracization from family and society at large, that you have to go and find your tribe. You have to go and create a whole new family. I know people that have done that. It's like, I always tell people now, like, even this concept of we're born into a family and we die in this family from an intergenerational standpoint, I'm like, what if we get to choose who our families are?
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways we do, because there are times you and I and your family, we chose each other.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely.
That was a conscious choice. It was like, okay, I want a journey in life with this individual. So even that concept, I don't want people, as we, round this up, to get stuck on, and that could even make you even more depressed and more everything when you are like, well, my family didn't turn out that way. I tried to be the cycle breaker, and I tried to be May, and I tried to be Maribel and Luisa and everybody else, and Bruno, and it didn't work out that way for me.
Right.
And I'm like, it doesn't always, there's not a specific destination for healing and for dealing and processing intergenerational trauma. Sometimes there are people I know that they were just like, my family, nobody was trying to hear it, so they're estranged from their family. And that can seem like, oh my gosh, this is so sad or whatever. But here's the thing. I always ask people, what is it going to cost you?
Right.
And what if you staying in that pattern versus you breaking free?
Yes.
And then when you think about the continuation of the pattern, the more you're in a toxic situation and the more you're in a cycle, the greater the chance you're going to repeat that cycle and you're going to continue and pass on toxicity, which is what we're seeing right now in our world.
Thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something. But wait, before you leave, visit and follow these Instagram accounts. Check out my website, exceptionalheroes.com, to learn more about my patent pending therapeutic device and to buy some Exceptional Heroes merch. See you guys next time, and always remember to listen, love, connect. Bye!